This is a tutorial on how to create good exam techniques for functional skills. Now, a lot of these you're going to be thinking, it should just be common sense, or why am I explaining these to you when most people should be doing them anyway? Well, the reason is, everyone knows if you get into an exam, it's a pressured situation, you might get a bit panicky, and it's just easy to forget to do a lot of these basic things that will help you to manage an exam better. So I'm going to list a few key tips of how to improve your exam. So the first one, in any exam of this nature, you should be allowed some blank paper when you start. What you can do, or what we advise all our learners to do, is actually, as soon as they get into that exam, make any notes that you can remember. So it might be methods such as a percentage method, or which average is which, for example. Anything that perhaps you've been struggling to remember, or when you've been revising before your exam, you can write that straight away on that paper. That's not cheating, as long as you've not brought notes into the exam with you. Anything that you're writing at the time on blank paper, that's perfectly fine. And as I say, we actually recommend people do that. So you've got it down, and if the question does then come up later on, you don't have to struggle to remember it again. So that's my first tip. So to summarise that, I'm just going to put create notes at the start of your exam if you can, and if you think it's going to be beneficial. Okay, so that's my first tip for how to improve your exam. So the second one, and actually a few following this, are more related to how to manage your time as best you can. So the first one, this is a bit that could vary depending on what your awarding organisation and which exam board you're using to do your functional skills. But the one we specifically use, if you're doing an online test, you will have a countdown clock at the top. Now, that can have its positives and negatives. Obviously, if you do get a bit panicky and nervous in an exam, you might look at the clock and it make you even worse. You might think, oh, I've not got enough time left, or you might start focusing on the clock. However, it's also very positive, because what it tells you is, how long have I spent on this question, or how long have I got left? Do I need to move on? And that's essentially my second tip. With this style exam, it's usually split into 3 tasks, and a level 2 is 2 hours, a level 1 is 1.5 hours. So what you want to be doing is spending no more than 30 to 45 minutes at absolute max on each task. So what I'm advising is frequently check the clock, make sure you haven't exceeded that time, and if you are getting up to that time, you haven't finished quite yet on a certain task, move on. So that's essentially, again, to summarise the second tip, frequently check your clock or your time to ensure you're not spending over 30 to 45 minutes per task. Okay, so the third key point is, if you've done a calculation or you've worked out an answer for a specific question, if for some reason you're thinking, do you know what, that doesn't look quite right, or that number's a bit too long, or maybe you've got a lot of decimal points in there, just something about it is not sitting too well with you. What I would recommend is you recalculate it once, and obviously remember, it's a calculator based exam, so you're always going to have that available to you. So if you're not sure, recalculate it, and if you get the same answer again, I would stick with that. What you don't want to get into is do the same question over and over again and you're still not happy with the answer, because again, that's going to lose you time, and time's going to be very valuable to you in this exam. So that third point is, if you're not happy with an answer, so if you are not happy with an answer, I would recalculate it once, and then move on. Okay, the next point Again, I said these middle few were all related to time. This one, and we've had this problem with learners before, is try to forget about a previous task when you're moving on to a new question, or even if it's within the same task and it's completely unrelated question. Just try to forget about what you've previously done, especially if you didn't think the last one was quite right, because you don't want to be going into that with an unclear head. It'll probably cloud your judgment and cloud your logic, and then you might struggle with that next question. So just try to forget about what's happened previously and move on to your next question. That's all tip number 4 is. So to summarize again, forget previous task. I know it might be easier said than done. As I say, you just don't want to be caught up in it. You're still thinking about your previous answer, and then you're struggling to do your next question because of that. So forget your previous task is tip number 4. Number 5, again, to do with time. If you finish early, make sure you've checked all your answers at least once. Or if you're doing, again, a computer-based exam, do not click the finish button until you're 100% happy, because you won't be able to get your test back and look through things. Now, you might be thinking at this point, this slightly contradicts point number 3, where I said just check your answer once and then move on. However, it's a slightly different point, because what I'm saying here is once you've finished the whole exam, just make sure you've read each question again, you've looked at your answer, does it seem sensible? Because everyone can make a silly mistake, whether it's just a slight calculation error, or I say not reading the question quite right. So you don't want to lose basic marks just for not doing something as simple as that. So always check back at the end before you're happy to submit your exam. So check paper at the end is point number 5. Okay, I'm going to move on to a new page for the next tip. If that'll load, it's been a bit slow. There we go. So number 6. This one, especially in functional skills exams, you can get questions and problems that are quite wordy. They give you quite a lot of information all at once. So it's really important, if you're not understanding straight away what it's asking you, read and highlight whatever you think might be a key point or key piece of information. They're going to be the things that you need to include in your answer, and it'll give you a hint on what sort of method or technique they're going to want you to use. So it's always worth having a highlighter or even just underlining in pen. As I say, anything that you think might be a key point that you're going to use. So read and highlight key info. That's tip number 6. Okay, and number 7, and possibly the final tip for these good exam techniques. Make sure, obviously I've mentioned before, it is a calculator based exam, so always use that calculator where you can. You might be quite confident and think, I can use mental arithmetic, I can do this in my head, I don't need a calculator. But obviously, like I've said before, everyone can make a mistake, and your calculator should be quicker anyway. So anything that you're not quite sure on, or as I say, any type of question, your calculator is there for your benefit, so make sure you're using it. And that is all the tips. So as I said at the beginning, these all might seem like common sense. However, we've all been there in a test, you get panicky, they're just basic things that you can forget. So make sure you're trying to use all these techniques, and that should help you to improve your performance on the day. And that's the end of this tutorial.